I think what helped me out was I didn't make the kind of money some of my other friends made. And I mean this by this. I had friends that got to the league the same time I got there, and they got signing bonus of 13, $14 million. Now, would I have loved to have that? Heck yeah. But I didn't have that kind of money. And then I was undrafted. So there's two things there. I didn't make a ton of money coming into the league. And then two, I'm undrafted. So I knew early on that I had to really, really figure out how to save and invest this money.
Welcome to the Richer Soul Podcast, where we share how to live in harmony across health, wealth, time, relationships, and spirituality. How do you bring them all together to live your ultimate life? The best thing is we've got nothing to sell, just great advice from people who've succeeded and lived that dream. Welcome to Richer Soul, Corey Parchman. It's great to have you join us today.
Rocky, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
And I'm excited to learn from you. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
I think just like anyone else, not much. You kind of see what's going on in the household, and you kind of figure things out. And as you get older, you kind of understand where things actually stood. I think my parents did a great job for the most part, keeping the money conversation, some of the struggles out of our conversations with us, which can be good and bad. I think that keeping it out protected us and kept us innocent, but then, some of the things we could have learned how to avoid once we got older. So I think that my parents did the best they could as far as trying to navigate that space of how much information do we share and how much do we not share with them about our financial situation. My middle-class family, blue-collar dad, my dad actually worked in the factory and ended up becoming a BA for the union, but he passed away shortly after getting that position. But I think I didn't realize where we were financially until I got older and looked back. So I would say not much, but you figure things out, right?
You do. School teach you anything?
No, we didn't talk much about money. It was... Once again, looking back, there's several opportunities I say that we could have done in school, but I will say I got a great education. I learned the basics about life, friendships, of course, basic education, math, science, things of that nature. But, I would say I did go to an inner city public school, but looking back, it was a great experience, other than not being taught much about money, but life skills.
Interesting. What was your growing up beyond the money? I mean, was it a pretty easy life, or was it a difficult life, or what kind of happened in there?
Great question. So it's weird because, for 9 years of my life, I was in a two-parent household, and everything that comes with the two-parent household, the balance and things of that nature. And then when I was 10 years old, my father passed away, a massive heart attack. Now, he was 39 years old at the time. When I was 10, I thought he was old. But then as I get older, I'm like, wow, 39 is pretty young, right?
Very young.
So I actually witnessed both sides of things, having two-parent household and see what it looks like, the dynamics of those things, the balance to just having just a mom in the household. But I will say this, a quick pause there. Losing my dad at 9, I probably learned more from him about life in those 9 years than I learned from anybody else. And I would say the first thing I learned about money from my dad was I came home from school one day with a paper in my hand, happy, and I handed it to him. I said, hey, if you sign this paper, they'll give us free lunch. And he ripped it up and he said, you don't get free lunch. I'll pay for your lunch. And that right there taught me in that moment right there, and as I've gone on, to everyone will need a hand up every now and then. Before you get that, try to figure it out yourself. Don't automatically go to that. So my whole life been built on trying to figure things out first before I ask for help. So those things, and I can keep going on, in the 9 years I have my dad, was amazing.
I would like you to go on, but I have a question about that
Yes.
because there's different kinds of help, right?
Yes.
There's help of giving you a handout, which is what you were talking about. But did that attitude prevent you from asking for help in the sense of teach me, mentor me, what can I learn? Or were the two separate things in your mind?
Yeah, two separate things in my mind. I think that it taught me to try first. Don't automatically default to help me out. And those things help you become very, very creative. It helps you become very, very, very thoughtful for what you want to do next. So I would say that attitude taught me to figure out, can I do it first and then ask for help? Now, I would say this, playing sports helped me understand when to ask for help. Another quick story from my dad in that same context. The coach, I was playing Little League football, and the coach was yelling at me, on me. And I go to my dad and I say, hey, this dude is riding me. I'm like probably like third grade, and I'm kind of frustrated because the coach is like constantly on me. And my dad says to me, "You need to appreciate that because he sees something in you. It's when he stops talking to you, is when he's giving up on you." So I learned there is when someone's trying to coach you, when someone's trying to teach you, you got to absorb it because they see something that you don't see. So those two lessons by my dad, two separate things, but two magnifying things that help me navigate, through life.
You've worked with a lot of coaches.
Yes.
Are they all bring value, or how do you kind of determine when they do and when they don't?
When you're younger, I don't think you understand if it is or if it isn't. You just kind of find a way to navigate through it. And then once your career at that time with them is over, then you kind of reevaluate what you got out of it. Just like anything else, nothing's going to be perfect, nothing's going to be great. But I truly believe no matter where I was at, I always learned something. Let's just say, well, the coach that there was a difficult coach to get along with, difficult coach to deal with. I may look back at me like that was a horrible experience, but what I did learn was how to deal with something like that. So I think there's always opportunity to learn, no matter what situation is, good or bad.
So you were taking the best out of the situation, whatever you were dealt with. You were able to find the silver lining, so to speak.
Yeah, it maybe sometimes not in real time. Sometimes you kind of figure it out. Sometimes you get frustrated with it, but at the end of the day, I think that's was always my guiding light of what I'm going to learn from this. How can I better myself and my surroundings by whatever the situation is?
Were there other lessons from your dad?
That was two of the main ones, and just being a spiritual leader in our household. I will get to that later on, but I have a 19-month-old son, and just wanting to be there and be that person he can look up to. Like I said, I only had 9 years with them, but learned so much. One more quick story about my dad.
Yeah.
I remember he was my little league baseball coach, and I got upset because he was buying all the kids treats after the game. And I was like, "Why are you buying everybody stuff? You're my dad, you're not their dad." And it just taught me that benevolent spirit. He's like, "Nah, man, they don't have it, so I have it, and we're gonna help them out." So that benevolent spirit never left me. Also, once again, just 9 years, but carrying a lot of stuff with me today.
How did it affect you after he died? Because it sounds like it was a pretty sudden type of thing.
Yeah, it was sudden. I think honestly, Rocky, I'm still figuring out how it affected me. You kind of navigate through life and you figure things out, but the older you get, I think you kind of reflect on certain aspects of what you actually lost. I think that as human beings, we're taught to keep moving forward and keep going. But then there's a time of reflection. And, every now and then it pops up. And, what I try not to do was when I had failures or hard times, blame it on not having a dad. And that kind of kept me through. But sometimes reality is reality. Yeah. You didn't have anybody to help you through that process. So, I think as I get getting older and now that I have a son, I'm starting to see more and more what I missed out on not having a dad.
And it happened right as you were kind of going into your teenage years,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is always turmoil, right?
Yeah. It's once again, as you navigate through that space, I think you just kind of live your life. You kind of like just go forward, but you don't realize like the things that you may have needed to unpack that didn't get unpacked. One of the things that I want to start one day is a bereavement camp for kids. And why I want to do that is because, when my dad died when I was 10, all the adults made all the decisions for me. And they were all in good faith. They were all trying to do the right things for me, help me out through it, send me here, take me there, pick me up. But no one asked me how I felt or what I wanted to do. And at that point in time, I felt so lonely. I just want to be with my family. But I had people come and pick me up from the house, take me places, but I just want to be at home. And oftentimes I felt like I was the only person in the world who's ever lost a dad. But if you have a bereavement camp for kids, you can be around other kids that have similar situations. And also, someone's there to ask them, how do you feel? What you want to do? Because me being 10 years old, being a kid, most adults were trying to guide me because they were doing the best they can. Every adult in my life was trying their best to put me in a better position. At the same time, looking back, I wish someone would ask me, what do you want to do? How do you feel?
No, and that's an important part of it. And there is a grieving process. And I think a lot of times, especially when the kids are younger, you can't make sense of it. Like it's just outside of your realm of knowledge or even understanding. And so it's a pretty big shock to the system. And it takes a good amount of time to overcome that. And as you said, you're still kind of working through it.
Yeah. And thankful, I have an amazing family. I have my faith. And you push through and you figure out things. And I've had an amazing life. But that doesn't exclude you from, pain, hurt.
Yeah.
So I think you just kind of like navigate both things. You have these success in life. Quick story. I don't get too deep, but
no, go ahead.
I got inducted 2 years ago to the Indiana Indianapolis Public School Hall of Fame. And I've only been married 2 years at the time. So after the event, it's a amazing award. I get inducted to the Hall of Fame. I go home and my wife's with me and I break down and start crying. And that was the first time she ever saw me in this state. And that's how my life has been. I have these amazing moments, like a Hall of Fame, like an NFL, like whatever. And I go home and cry afterwards because my dad's not there to see it. Like the person who's the most influential person in my life isn't there to see those things. So you go through these high moments, but then when you get home, you kind of realize that he's not there. And that was the first time someone ever saw me go through that. I've been going through that since I was 9 years old. I have these great highs of highs situations. And then later on, I go back and cry because now my dad's not there. When I play football, I always go to the field a little earlier in the day so I can find a place in the stands and say, well, he's sitting right there. So before the game would start, I'd always go, no matter where I played at, what city I played in, I'll always go out there before the game started and find a place up in the stands and say, okay, he's sitting right there. And that kind of helped me get through things.
It's not easy. How was the teenage years in high school?
I think it was pretty good from a standpoint of having an exceptional ability to be able to play football. I think that helped garner a lot of confidence in who I was as a person, being in the paper, showing your skills off, people talking to you, people want to shake your hand, people being nice to you. So I think those things helped out my teenage life experience. I think a lot of my peers oftentimes were trying to figure out who they were, who they were as a person or what's next. I kind of had a path written for me. It was like, you're good at this football thing, so stick with it.
And so was that like a pretty easy journey from there to playing college football and to the NFL? Or
Rocky, I wish it was. Like I just told you that I had an amazing high school experience, starting quarterback, 100-meter dash city champ. So as you can imagine, every college team in the country was recruiting me, wanted me to go there. But then once they figured out I didn't have the grades to go, I didn't get any more scholarship offers. So I went from the high to the high of being one of the best players in the state of Indiana to not even being offered a college scholarship to play football or not even knowing if I was going to go to college. So it wasn't a straight line by no stretch. So I ended up having to enroll in the Ball State and sit out from playing football for an entire year. And what's funny about Ball State is they would send me letters, recruiting letters to play football for them, and I wouldn't even open because I had my eyes set on, Michigan, Notre Dame, Florida State, and then a letter comes from like Ball State. I'm like, what is a Ball State? But I think what was good was when they came to visit me, I didn't burn any bridges. I didn't blow them off. When they came to visit me, when I was in the height of my recruiting, when these big teams were calling me, Ball State came to my school and I talked to them and was cordial and respectful to them. So then when I had to go back to them later on, the door was still open because I was so respectful to them and still showed them a lot of respect.
Did no one talk to you about the educational component of having to do that? Or
Yeah, you hear about it, but you often think, well, because I play ball, they'll figure something out, or they'll. And when I didn't realize, I didn't know this. I had no idea that there were 1,000 Corey Parchmans around the country that was just as good as I was. I had no idea, and that's when I realized then, like, wow, you're a dime a dozen. So people talk to you about it, but I think certain things aren't as important as that they should be. I think just getting an education is good, but how to get education, but make sure you're doing the best you can. Those things weren't like really expressed. I have feelings now about, certain coaches about why I wasn't pushed or helped out. But yeah, that wasn't talked about much. How important it was for my grades to be not only to play football, but hell for life to go to college. So those things are you learn, right?
you do learn. And that's why I was asking. I wasn't sure, what that
You're fine.
situation was like and kind of what came to be of it and how it all was. And yeah, that's not easy. These days it's amazing what they do for college football. These kids are making $1 million.
Oh man, it is my friends and I, my college room teammates, we share a group chat and we discuss that all the time. We see how much money these guys are making and we were like scraping our pennies together to get a pizza. But back to our original conversation, I learned a lot from that though. I learned so much from that struggle. I learned so much from all those things. So back to the original point, there's some lessons to be learned. So I think I probably picked it up early on in life when I had struggles that whatever this is, I can learn something from it.
There was the other comment you made too, and I think that happens a lot for kids in high school or even parents of kids that age. You're comparing yourselves in a tiny pond and you have no idea what the ocean looks like and how much talent is actually out there. And I think when kids hit college, that's when they get that wake up call of the difference that's there and so forth. And that's another thing we were just talking a little bit earlier today about the kids who have natural sports ability and they're the A players that everyone wants versus the kid who's the B player and still gets a chance. Those B players have grit because they had to have grit. And
Yes.
so the first time the A player gets knocked down, and I don't mean, just tackled, I mean emotionally, they don't hold up as well as that B player because that B player has been punched over so many times. They've got the grit to keep going. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, you're exactly right. There's oftentimes you'll hear about a star player in whatever sport in high school. I mean, a great star player, and you're like, what happened to him? And a lot of times when they went to that next level, they got that punch and they were able to adapt to it. So you'll hear about a guy that's really, really good in high school and never hear about him again because of that. Same thing in the pros. You got guys who are in college are amazing athletes, amazing players, number one player. And you're like, what happened to him? What happened to him? A lot of times that punch for the first time knocks them down or knocks them out where they can't even figure things out. So you're exactly right. Sometimes having those difficulties can build that ability to adjust.
No, that's very true. So you got to college, you played football there finally?
Yes, finally played. It got off to a slow start, a real slow start. Even when I started playing, I wasn't playing, so it got off to a real slow start. For a number of reasons. I mean, the skill set that I had didn't necessarily match what we did at that school. And that's a real important thing people don't realize about sports. You can have a skill level, but as a match whatever team you're on, whatever schemes they run. And, my speed didn't really match what they were doing as a program.
So then how did you get from there to the NFL?
Once again, it's never a straight shot for me, man. And that's okay. It's never okay. So, I did have a great kick returning ability. I was very fast, one of the fastest people in the country. So once I showed the scouts that, I'm not performing that much on the field at Ball State, but I have these attributes. When I did get a shot to play, I played really well. So I think you combine those sparks of greatness they saw and with the attributes of my speed and my size, let's give this guy a shot. So that's kind of how I got there. Playing Division I football, it lends you to playing against other bigger schools. So we played against Florida Gators, one of the best teams in the country. I had an amazing game against them. So scouts were like, well, if this guy can play against them, he probably can play against everybody else. And scouts understand if you go to certain schools, those schools may not match your skill level. It's not like now where I can transfer to another school and play there. When I was in college, I was like one of those old guys back in my day. When I was in college, if you transferred to another Division I school, you had to sit out a year. So imagine a guy like me who's already sat out a year anyway, going playing and sitting out again. So there was no option for me to sit out to go play anywhere else. So scouts understand that these guys have this skill level, and maybe it's the school, maybe it's the coaching staff. Not saying anything bad about either one, but maybe it doesn't fit that guy's skill level.
No, and that makes sense. So you get to the NFL, everyone thinks that's like the winning ticket. And depending on, and I think it's better now. I don't know what the minimums are these days, but I'm guessing when you went in, the minimums weren't that high, were they, for how much you got paid?
I think when you say minimum not high, I think it was all relative to that time. I think that what I was making fresh out of college was more than 99% of people I know 1 year out of college. So
Right.
Perspective wise, I kind of looked at it like that. Now, with that being said, it's not a lifelong amount I'm going to make, but I had an advantage. Most people that I knew that went to college, their first year out were making the kind of money I was making. So relatively speaking, it was pretty good. Overall, no. From the NFL standpoint, no. But this is a landing spot. This is an opportunity. It was great for me to be able to make that kind of money and invest it. And what I'll tell you this, and I'll tell everybody this, the NFL, those initials mean not for long. So when I got there, I realized that this may not be for a long point in time. So the money I did make, I had to figure out how I can sustain this in other areas.
No, and that's true. And I think that's one of the biggest things with sports is all of a sudden you go from no money to lots of money, and you don't necessarily understand money and how quickly it disappears.
Yeah.
And so it's
And
not
most
long.
of us grew up in an environment. I just told you before, I had an amazing family. Wouldn't ever change it. We never discussed money. So a lot of guys in my same situation go pro. So think about if you didn't discuss it in your house, you didn't discuss it at the schools, now you get a lump sum thrown in your lap. Go figure it out, right? And what happens is you have a lot of people that are predatory. They know that. They know that you probably don't know much about money. So those are the guys that come after you and try to help you out and mean well. And some can be in your family. Some could be in your church. Some could be the guy down the street. So they come from all over the place that they see an opportunity for them to make money off you. But once again, you're trying to be the best. Think about this. In order to make it to the NFL, you have to be streamlined focused on being the greatest thing at this one thing. That's a small window. You have 1 million people want to play, but there's only 2,000 people. Think about how focused you got to be to make it there. What time do you have to learn about financing or investing? So yeah, unless you're lucky to have a family person or somebody near you that knows that you're probably not going to know much about anything about investing or money.
So how did that work out? You got your money. Did you do a good job with it, or were there lessons to be learned?
Yeah. So I think what helped me out was I didn't make the kind of money some of my other friends made. And I mean this by this. I had friends that got to the league the same time I got there, and they got signing bonus of $13-14 million. Now, would I have loved to have that? Heck yeah. Oh my goodness, heck yeah. But I didn't have that kind of money. And then I was undrafted. So there's two things there. One, I didn't make a ton of money coming into the league. And then two, I'm undrafted. That means the team has no leverage. I have no leverage. They can cut me at any time. My money's gone. So I knew early on that I had to really, really figure out how to save and invest this money. So yeah, I saved everything, and then until I was able to understand business and learn to invest it.
Yeah, you figured it out. And it sounds like that's the one thing for you, is that you're constantly figuring it out, learning. And regardless of what happens, it sounds like you figured out how to pivot through it. Where did that come from?
I never even thought about that at all. I just kind of just do it, right? And my wife asked me, my now wife, we were on our first date, she asked me, she's like, where do you get this from? And I just couldn't put a finger on it. And you just get up and do it, right? And that's my attitude. I don't have any special powers. Just wake up and do it. And she's like, well, everybody just don't wake up and do it. I'm like, I don't know, other than, just figure out and do it. So I can't even answer that question to this day. I just, once again, I know I had a great environment growing up, having a dad, things of that nature, but that's just my attitude. Just figure it out and go. But, Rocky, the hard thing I've had to figure out is not projecting on the other people because they can't figure it out, and not getting frustrated with other people because they're not moving as fast as I am, or they're not trying to figure things out. I've had to still to this day adjust to that of, what do you mean you can't do it? It's easy, but it doesn't come that easy to certain people. So there's still an adjustment there for me.
No, there always is. There's no doubt about it. You said the NFL is not for long. How long did you get to play?
5 years, man. 5 years. So ended up doing 1 year on the practice squad, 1 year in the reserve, and then 3 years with actually active playing. So I got a total of 5 accrued years in the NFL. So definitely made it past the minimum of 3 days. People say the minimum of 3 years is like 3 days. In actuality, it's not that long.
That's short.
It's because contracts aren't guaranteed. They're constantly running guys through that you don't even hear about or know about. There's so many guys on the back end of the roster we never even hear about. So those guys come in and out, sign a contract for a day, get cut, come back. You hear about the big stars like the Tom Brady's and things like that, but there's more of guys like me on the back end than it is a guy like a Tom Brady.
No, and that's true, because only one or two or maybe a handful of the entire get those kind of salaries. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not everybody.
One of my teammates, man, he showed me, it was like amazing to see. He was getting paid $450,000 a week, and seeing that check every week was like, wow. But what was actually sobering a little bit is when you see how much doggone taxes are taken out of your check. Now, had I saw my check with the taxes already gone, I'd have been fine with that amount. If you see what you could have brought home and what you actually brought home, you're like, wow. And people don't know, it's called a professional players tax. You get taxed in every city you play in. So every city we played in, you get taxed at that tax rate, whatever the city they're in. Plus, if you don't have a residence in the state you play in, you get taxed in your hometown, taxed in that state, and then get taxed by every team you play against. So yeah, it can get chopped up pretty quick.
It does. And that's what people don't realize, is how fast that money disappears, because there's your agent, there's all these other things that you've got to, that take a cut. And by the time it gets to you, there's a small piece of it left. So while you think you're making all this money, the reality is you're not making a ton, and you're only making, in your case, you made it for 5 years, and now you're on your own for the rest. So good career in NFL. Then what happened?
Yeah. So I committed the ultimate professional athlete sin. I started thinking about plan B while I was still in plan A. And that's when I started in real estate. I'd say 2 years after being in the league, I did a lot of research. So finally, about my third year in the league, I started pulling the trigger on real estate. I started buying properties and renting them out. And I kind of went there and I evolved from buying or renting them out to buying them and selling them to buying land and building them. And then also developing contracts with the city and different real estate projects. So they kind of evolved from one aspect of real estate to another. That's kind of how it got going, was I started doing it while I was still in the league. And the deep part about that was I learned about what I was doing. I didn't just give my money to somebody and say, hey, do real estate for me. I actually learned how to do it myself and learn the mistakes and learn all those things. I think my biggest mistake I made when I first started was I was going to build these beautiful homes in my old neighborhood. I was going to be the guy who comes back to his neighborhood and build low-income houses and name the streets after, had this big plan and didn't do my research. And I bought a piece of land for $250,000 and couldn't build one house on there. So I would say my lesson from that was, just make sure you do due diligence. So I paid $250,000 to learn about doing due diligence.
Why couldn't you build on it? Were there limitations?
So when we did the research we did do on it, it was more so, okay, this is what we want to look like. This is what we want to build. This is how much it costs. So, okay, let's do a deal with tax credit and get it done. Or you rewind it back. We should have first met with a surveyor to tell us how many properties we can actually get on this plot of land. We skipped that part, went right to the part of we want these houses to look like this color and the paint this color and the mailbox this color, with the grass this way and the trees over here. And then we didn't do the first part of getting a survey. So what we had plotted out in our budget was we're going to build 28 homes on this plot of land. And by those 28 homes, and based on what it's going to cost us to build and how much we're going to sell them for, pays for the infrastructure of the neighborhood. And, of course, pays for the house being built. And then we have profit on top of that 28 houses. So you build 28 houses, 14 of them pays for the infrastructure of the entire place. The other 14 are all profits. So we get to the surveyor, and he was like, yeah, you can't build 28 houses on this. You can build about 4. And it was due to the setbacks in an area. So each house had to be a certain distance from each other, setbacks from the street, the water, the sewer lines, and all those things taken into account. So it's 4.5 acres, but how it's designed based on a surveyor, you can only get so many houses on that lot. So yeah, that was a mistake that I made. So I learned quickly. Do your homework.
And that's the one thing with mistakes. You get 2 choices. You can learn from your own, or you can figure out how to learn from others.
Yes.
And so I'd say it's cheaper to learn from others. Most people would prefer to learn on their own. I don't know why that is.
I think the ones that prefer to learn on their own don't have a choice, and it just happens. I don't think anybody sets out like, let me make a big mistake so I can learn from this. I think that it's just kind of like fumbling through it. They kind of go from there. So yeah, I mean, good grief. Yeah, there's things I've learned, but I could have learned it with a little less heartburn if somebody would have just told me. Me learning that I should talk to a survey first before I do this valuable lesson wouldn't have cost me $250,000.
No, but you learn.
Yeah,
so you started your real estate business, and then what happened?
Yeah, so I think when you start to get into real estate, you have to start to evolve into other things. And I started to do that anyway. So you say, okay, I'm doing real estate, but I need to broaden my portfolio and do other things. So that's when I started doing things for the city, having contracts with the city, having contracts with HUD, not just focusing on the home aspect, other things within the realm of real estate, but not homes. Luckily, I did that because in '08, we had the housing crisis, and I was right in the middle of it. And it put a lot of people out of business, out of work that was in the real estate by itself. Well, I'd already kind of, adjusted and went to other areas. So I took a hit, but it didn't take me out all the way because I had other things going on. I started a company called Clear Vision Media, which is a digital signage company that was doing really well. So I started to pivot a little bit before the crash. I didn't see it coming, like not at all. But still, I just knew it was so saturated with so many people and the prices were changing. It was like, wow. I knew I had to pivot to something else. So I pivoted into the media space and started a company called Clear Vision Media. So went through the '08 crisis. Took a hit. My financial advisor, I remember him telling me the only good thing about this is you're young. So, I think that was, but One thing I didn't do, I never leveraged my properties like most people did. When I would buy a piece of property and get a mortgage on it, I wouldn't leverage it no more than 20, 30%. I would love to
Mm.
sometimes mortgage it and get 80, 90%, but I'd have been upside down like the rest of the world. So luckily I didn't do that. So I didn't lose many of my properties I own. I didn't over leverage. So I was okay. I made it out of the crisis with a couple of skids on my arms and my neck, but I'm good.
Well, that's good. And then you started other businesses. Have you expanded beyond that as well?
Yeah. So yeah, I think that, once you kind of get into business, you start to evolve into other things and you start to see it. And especially after that crisis, you realize like, I can't just put all my eggs in one basket. You have to do a number of things. So I started another business in Florida. It was a concierge car wash service. So we would set up a car wash inside of luxury apartments in their garage, luxury condos would be in their garage, and the tenants would bring their cars down to get them washed. And it was one of those things where it was so exclusive because it made it so convenient for the tenants to get their cars washed right on site. Instead of having to go to a car wash, you got it right there. And it was crazy part. I mean, we're washing like Lamborghinis, Bentleys, Mercedes, all these expensive cars because we were right in Miami in a sunny Isle. So I made sure I picked high end places to partner with because I knew the margins would be there from what they paid to get it washed and the service would be there. So started that business. Also started my own preschool, an all boys preschool in my hometown. That was a passion project. I wanted to make sure my kids got off to a great start, especially my old neighborhood. It's called Mini Men Pre-K and All Boys Preschool. My degree is actually in education, but of course, football played a little more than being a teacher. So I went the football route, but it's always been in my heart, education. So yeah, just definitely diversified my portfolio. I said I own a number of apartment buildings in Indianapolis, and now the focus for the last, I would say, 6 years has been business acquisitions and buying existing businesses from baby boomers. Now, you spoke about before about learning from somebody else. What's better than to buy a business that's already established from somebody that's about to retire? So I've been really focusing on purchasing those businesses and teaching others how to buy businesses from retiring baby boomers. By the year 2032, about 6 million companies will go out of business because you have retiring baby boomers who have no one to turn it over to. Most of the people I meet, their kids don't want to take it over or they don't have kids. So it's like, well, what we're going to do with this business? So a lot of those businesses are going to go out. So I'm working now to try to acquire some and then also show others how to acquire those businesses.
I have found I'm a fan of business acquisition. I'm not a fan of non-business owners doing business acquisition without understanding what it means to run a business.
Yeah. And I agree with you. So the only ones I work with are the ones who will be owner operators. And I work with mostly, former athletes, but they want to buy in their hometown. But yeah, I only work with people that be owner operators. If you're talking about, buying a business and living 200 miles away, then that's not my focus because my goal is for the people to keep the businesses open. The only way we're going to thrive here in America in these small towns if these businesses stay open. If you have someone that's going to buy it and run into the ground, these small towns are going to go right with it. So I only focus on people who are looking to be owner operators and run those businesses.
No, and that's fine, but not everyone is cut out to run a business. There's a whole lot of work that goes into it. And I think these days they make it sound easy, just like everything else. And it's
Yeah,
not.
what's neat about this is, what happened with the real estate market, it was an easy entry point and everyone got into it and got saturated and got destroyed. This takes a lot of time and effort. Business acquisition is a long process. And if you're not serious about it, you're going to drop out of it really, really early. So it's really a long process. So I think that it's going to weed a lot of people out of it because of the process. A lot of people are not going to stick around for 6 to 12 months just to look for deals before they even find one they want to do. So yeah, I think because it takes so much time to do it, it's going to weed a lot of people who aren't serious about it out and kind of get things, they don't even out that way.
No, I get it. And I work with a lot of business owners. Actually, I was working with someone recently who we had to renegotiate the purchase price because it was just out of line. Like there wasn't going to be enough money to pay for the business he bought. And so a lot of times they don't even understand what does it take to pay off the business and make money and pay all the bills inside the business.
Yeah, so that's what we walk through. We talk about those things of, what do you want to make off the business and can the business afford that? Those are the things we walk through. And then also there's a lot of education to go in also. the people I work with don't buy deals off the line. They often find or talk to business owners who don't have their business listed. And that can be a pain also because the evaluation process, I know how it feels. Most business owners feel like their business is worth $20 trillion. And then when you do the evaluation and tell them how much it's actually worth, you're like, wow. So it's not, that's why I said that it's a long process. I know the internet they seem easy, but the ones who really want to do it are going to figure out how to navigate through it. And the ones who are just in it to try to get in and out and get rich quick, they're going to weed themselves out because it's a long process. We've worked on deals where the owner, evaluated his business himself around he was selling for $3 million. And when I broke down the actual value of his business, it was like, wow, it's not worth that much. He was trying to count his old equipment as value, and that old equipment was going to break down soon, and he tried to buy his building. It's like, all that means a lot to you, but to a bank or to an investor, it means nothing because the value of it doesn't sustain or hold itself. So it's a lot of education pieces. And that's why I do educate. I don't work with anyone who's a fly by night, for anyone who's not serious, and they weed out pretty quick. Once we have that initial phone call, they weed out pretty quickly, and you kind of get a glimpse of who's serious and who's kicking tires. If someone comes to me and say they want to own an HVAC business, I immediately turn them down because if you don't have a license, you don't even be nowhere near that space. And I hear it on the internet all the time about I own a plumbing business, HVAC. I'm like, if you don't have a license, you are heavily dependent on somebody else to run your business for you. So, I just try to dispute a lot of those trends, things that sound good. I hear about, laundromat. I'm like, well, if everybody's running through that, the price is going to be driven up so high, the value's not going to be there. So those are the things that when people are serious that I educate them on to get rid of all those myths out there because there's so many out there. So I see one more HVAC plumbing and laundromat. I'm like, if it was that easy, I'd be doing it, right?
So you had mentioned something earlier. You talked about the spiritual connection and being a leader and a dad.
Yes.
So what's that all about?
Yeah, and when I say spiritual, I know spiritual means so many things to so many different people. I think as individuals, we have to define that themselves or yourself. I think that, I think of it as being like a personal computer, like it's mine and it's my thing. And that has to be that way because I never want to take my journey, my spiritual journey, and look at someone else's and compare it to that or think my journeys look a certain way. So I have to be really in tune with what my journey looks like. So that's really important to me. I talk about my journey, but only from a personal standpoint, not from a standpoint of trying to tell anybody else what to do. Because you as an individual have to figure out that space. So yeah, so having a son now and losing my dad has taken me on an entirely different spiritual journey that I didn't even know existed. Like I told you before, I didn't know what I missed out on until I had a son. So the spiritual journey of trying to figure out how do I navigate, my journey with his journey, but not get in the way. I don't want to, I've had a lot of experience about things, but I got to let him go in. He's still young and I can help shape certain things, but I don't want to get in his way of getting in his journey because no one got in my way. And it's been an amazing experience of spirituality. And I really appreciate that.
No, and I think that's the one thing people don't realize is it is an individual choice. You have to figure out what works for you and live in accordance with the things that are most important to you. You learned a lot of lessons growing up. Did you learn a lot of lessons post growing up, so to speak? We're all still growing up, I guess.
We definitely are. Yeah, I do a lot of self-reflection all the time and try to figure out, in situations, being a leader of an organization, being a leader of things, trying to cope with sometimes your decision not going to be accepted by everybody. Sometimes your thoughts is not going to be accepted by everybody. Sometimes the decisions you make, you'll get booed from the crowd, right? But just knowing that you really, really thought it out and you really, really push through, means a lot. Because like I said, I make decisions as a leader, maybe to let someone go, but everyone in the organization probably could have loved that person. But now you have to adjust to, I made a decision. How do I now move forward? Or, having a wife has been amazing for me also. Or, you have these decisions you have to make that's not the crowd's favorite and adjusting to that. We've all been there, right? Where you've had to make a decision and the rest of the group is like, no, like, and then no one may not speak to you the next day, or you may have a vision and they don't see it the way you see it. And there's a lot of pushback and still trying to push through and say, I know in my heart, I know I did the research. This is the right way to go, and not being steered away, because the crowd can steer you away from a lot of your business decisions. But you have to say to yourself, I've done the work. I put in the work. I put in the time. This is where we're going, and move forward with it and be okay with whatever decision happens after that.
No, that's true. And I mean, these are the life lessons, and not everyone is going to agree with you. That's
Yeah.
just the reality of it, right? And you see that in football all the time, right?
Yeah.
We should have done this, should have done that, should have, and it's like, when was the last time you were on the field?
You know what's interesting, Rocky, and I talk to my wife about this all the time. I struggle with this too. So you use that analogy about football, and then people can see that, because I can say to them, well, have you played the game? And they'll say no. And then it's like, naturally, no, okay, I get it. You've actually played, so you're going to know more. And most people get that, right? You played in the game, you know more. They respect that. But when it comes to business and then employees, that credibility is not as strong. So you get this advice from people, or you say certain things and you get questioned. It's like, you want to say, have you ever ran a business before? But you can't say that.
Why not?
Once again, as a leader, you have to parse your words. Once again, and I've never said this out loud, but if I talk about football and someone argues that, I'm like, hey, have you ever played before? They're like, no. I'm like, I played. I know. I've been in there. I know what the locker room, all the things. But in business, or when you run a business, you have employees or whatever, you oftentimes want to say that, because what I try to do is I try to over-explain things, because I want everybody to understand where the decision came from, and it's come out of the sky. I try to over-explain to everybody what everything is. Hopefully they understand like the why behind that decision, and I'm not just pulling it out of nowhere. And then you still get questions but you got to persevere through that mentally and still believe in what you're doing, right?
You do. I'm working with a lot of business owners, being a business owner, and also just seeing how employees behave. It is a night and day different outlook. Not to say one's right or wrong, it's just a very different outlook. And when it comes to business, you have to have a certain outlook, and you have to make hard decisions. That's just the reality of the situation. And
And when I tell them, I try to explain when I do make a decision, because I over-explain things. Like, most employees are looking at it from how it affects them. I got to look at how it affects the entire organization. But once again, people are inward thinking when it comes to a business themselves. The employee says, how does it affect me? And I'm like, well, I can't just look at how it affects one person. I got to look at how it affects the entire team. So the view is going to be a little bit different. And I get it. When they don't understand it, I understand it, because their view comes from a different perspective. Their view also comes from a space from, I can just leave anytime. My view is, this is my thing, and I can't leave. So a lot of things you think about as you go through that, I get why the thought process, you just try to help, hopefully they buy into it, and you over explain it to where they get it. They get it themselves.
well, and I think one of the most classic things is they don't understand their paycheck comes from serving clients.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, that's where the paycheck comes from. And if you're not serving the end user or the client and they go away, your company can't pay you in the future. And
Yes.
I think there's a whole lot of disconnect there
Mhm.
from that. Nor do they understand how much other money is spent above and beyond their salary to deliver something.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
just the overhead costs and the marketing costs and everything else that go into it. In business, there's a whole lot of that kind of comes around.
So imagine, like I did, running a school, and people see that as a philanthropy, but it's still a business.
Mhm.
And try to explain what that actually means. And it's, once again, people oftentimes look at the school as being a philanthropy, a gift, but it's, if you don't operate like it's a business, you're not going to be in business to have a school. And trying to get the employees to understand that was probably one of my biggest challenges of them trying to explain why we do certain things a certain way. Once again, when you work in certain capacities, it's thought of, well, this is a charity almost. It's like, but it's still a business. If it doesn't, and you try to explain it, and when you're forward facing, of course you're a certain way, but behind the scenes you got to operate, because if you don't operate like that, you're not going to be in business. And trying to get people to, and it was tough for me, because people thought they knew the mission and what I wanted to do, but then on the backside of it, they thought of me as just being this business guy. I'm like, yeah, I'm that guy. I'm both. If I don't operate this, can't serve any kids. So yeah.
They think you're the money tree.
Yeah, back to you said before about the contracts, the assumption. So a lot of the issues with former players in general is the assumption from the public that you have this kind of money, and the pressure that's put on you by old friends or family members And this is why the pressure is there and it's real, because some people say, well, they don't deserve it. Yeah, you're right. But think about that guy or those people who played catch for you when you were 5 or 6 years old or 10 years old or picked you up in practice. Yeah, you don't owe them anything, but there's still a sense of thank you. You have to measure how long that's going to go, though, because there's a lot of people who came when you were a celebrity, but there's a lot of people who came before that when you were just Corey. So back to the whole thing about the money thing, the assumption that you're just, because they hear NFL, they automatically assume you make. Prime example, my signing bonus. When I signed the Jaguar, I took all the time. It was $2,300. People assume when I had a signing bonus, it was a couple $100,000. I'm like, no, it's $2,300, which was great for me as a former college student. But once again, that's not long-term money. So it's a lot of the assumption. So that assumption still comes with a business owner too, that you're the money tree. You got it. You don't have to do this. You can pay for this, just buy this. It's like, no, it's still a business.
No, and that's very, very true. And I think a lot of that is just better understanding so that you can make the right types of decisions. Is there anything else you wanted to share today that you didn't get a chance to?
I think I spilled my guts about everything, right? I talked about everything. I mean, we talked about, growing up, those things, business, family, football. That's me, all together. Just once again, I appreciate the opportunities I've gotten to have. I look forward to continuing.
What's one truth about success you wish more people understood?
There is a responsibility that comes with that and a burden that comes with that.
There is a burden. Yes.
Yes.
What's a lesson that cost you a lot but was worth every penny?
Lesson, well, that property I purchased that I couldn't build anything on, but that cost me a penny though. That's a good question. Probably believing in myself. And when things got hard, digging deep and figuring things out and believing more and more in myself. That didn't cost me anything, a penny, but I learned a lot from it.
No, it is. It's you learn through the grit. And that's a big part of growing up. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Good question. I know I keep going back to believing in yourself, but I would say study, do research, read, learn as much as you can about everything. I'll probably my biggest thing, read and learn as much as you can about a number of different things. That'd be my advice, because you never know what direction you want to go in, but having knowledge in a lot of different things will help you navigate you through that process.
No, that's very, very true. If people would like to learn more about you, where can they find you?
Thanks, dude. I'll do my shameless plugs now. No, just you just go to, CoreyParchman.com. Just go there. CoreyParchman.com will lead you everywhere you need to go. To social media, LinkedIn. Just go to my website, CoreyParchman.com, and you can learn everything you know about me. A little more in detail than we on the podcast right here, but still learn a lot about me, about the NFL, buying a business, my stories, my books, my experiences. It's all on CoreyParchman.com.
Cool. We'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rocky. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for checking out the full unedited video of the Richer Soul podcast. You can get the full audio podcast with intro, outro, and a ton more details here on YouTube or whatever your favorite podcast player is. Don't forget, we've got hundreds of episodes for you to go back through, and you can also get episode information on the Richer Soul website as well. Don't forget to subscribe so you're automatically updated as to what's going on and every time we release a new episode. The first few episodes of the Richer Soul podcast actually lay out the entire framework that everything has built on over all of these years. So check them out as well. Thanks for listening.